By now, any horror fan worth their salt knows who the top dogs of horror heroes are. But what about those who don't get the same love? There are plenty of great horror movie heroes who are simply overlooked, and it's these characters that we're gonna be talking about today. So, with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 horror movie heroes everyone forgets about. Number 10, John Trent in The Mouth of Madness. In the Mouth of Madness is not one of John Carpenter's most talked about movies, but it absolutely rules. Now, of course, Carpenter has given the horror genre some incredible heroes over the years, such as Halloween's Laurie Strode, and of course, The Thing's MacReady. And fortunately for us, Sam Neill's John Trent, despite his rather generic name, is similarly as interesting. In the movie, this skeptical insurance investigator is tasked with hunting down the elusive Stutter Kane, a horror author whose books sell like hotcakes. Quickly though, Trent finds himself inside a world seemingly created by the author himself, facing down the prospect of eldritch horrors about to be unleashed onto the world. Sam Neill is excellent in the role, convincingly growing from a no-nonsense straight man to someone who you'd absolutely throw in a padded cell for the good of society. It's an underrated performance, and John Trent is an underrated character, so get this movie watched if you like your cosmic horror. Number 9, Nora Price, Underwater. Speaking of eldritch horrors, Underwater is an excellent creature feature from 2020, and features a sadly already mostly forgotten about protagonist in the form of Kristen Stewart's Nora Price. With shades of Alien's Ellen Ripley, Nora starts as the engineer of a research base located deep beneath the ocean. When things go wrong though, and the researchers find themselves facing off against a nuts threat, it's only Nora who's able to get her stuff together and figure out an escape route for the dwindling survivors. As expected, Kristen Stewart is great, and she always is in a role like this, giving the character a real emotional grit that invests us into the story. It also helps that the writing does a lot to get us on her side as well, to the point where her final moment hits like a truck. Number 8, Alex Browning, Final Destination. Unless you've been living under a rock for the last 20 years, you probably know that each Final Destination film revolves around a group of people who narrowly escape a gory death thanks to one of them having a premonition moments before they were supposed to meet their demise. Death, however, isn't ready to let them go just yet and begins picking them off one by one in the order that they were supposed to die. Now, the franchise has had some good, proper protagonists over the years, but the first protagonist and novice psychic is Alex Browning, who saves himself and a group of his classmates from an exploding plane in the opening moments of the first film. Played by the pretty good Devon Sawa, the reason why Alex as a character isn't really remembered is that the rest of the cast in this flick kinda all overshadow him. He's alongside Ali Larter's Claire, who would go on to be the hero memorably in the second movie, and even supporting players like Sean William Scott and Kerr Smith make more of an impact in the movie. Which is a shame, because Alex is still a large part of why this first film works, even if he does have to play the straight man against bigger personalities. Number 7, Marty MIKALSKI, The Cabin in the Woods. It's easy to dismiss the stereotypical stoner character in horror movies, and usually they only serve as nothing more than brief comedic relief before meeting their demise. Marty MIKALSKI, however, does a good job of flipping that trope on its head. In fact, Marty's recreational habit serves him well, and prevents the villainous organization's various chemicals from affecting him in the cabin. He sees the situation in this film for what it really is, spotting hidden cameras, hearing the subliminal messages, and more. Likeable, funny, and way smarter than given credit for. Despite being pinned as an unreliable slacker by his friends, Marty constantly outlives everyone's expectations for him. Now, to be fair, that might not be the best thing, as despite all of this, his survival does result in the Ancient Ones rising up and destroying humanity, but he did say that we shouldn't be afraid to let society crumble and start over. And who knows, he was right about everything else, so maybe the world being destroyed by giant gods at the end of this movie is for the best. Number 6, Daniel Challis, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. John Carpenter's original plan for the Halloween franchise was for it to become an anthology series, with each entry being its own separate entity, unrelated to the others. After the success of the first and second movies, however, Michael Myers grew to be a horror icon, and fans demanded more. But he would have to wait, as the third entry in the franchise gave us a glimpse at how Carpenter's plan would have played out if people could have accepted Michael Myers being gone. Season of the Witch features its own separate plot, revolving around Halloween masks being designed to facilitate mass murder. It blends horror and sci-fi with a little bit of witchcraft thrown in for good measure too. And with the absence of the Shape, Laurie Strode is also nowhere to be seen, so protagonist duties are carried out by Dr. Daniel CHALLIS. Now, this guy is a flawed man with his own personal demons who just absolutely loves shagging, and uncovers the Silver Shamrock Company's plot and takes it upon himself to foil it when he's not in bed. Because of its reputation though, CHALLIS is all but forgotten within the horror canon, to be forever overshadowed by Laurie Strode. Number 5. Kirsty Cotton, HELLRAISER. Pinhead, as you probably are aware, is known the world over. His design is pretty much flawless, and he's up there with the likes of Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees as one of the most recognizable villains in horror history. However, with such a great design, Pinhead and his gang of Cenobites take center stage and tend to overshadow anyone that they share the screen with. But what's the point in a good villain if they don't have a nemesis to square off against? Fortunately, Kirsty Cotton fills that role and is severely underrated within the horror canon in doing so. She's quick thinking and manages to get the better of the Cenobites more than once, outwitting them in the first face-off and even managing to escape their own realm in the sequel. As far as final girls go, Cotton is one of the best there is. Number 4, Julie James, I Know What You Did Last Summer. I Know What You Did Last Summer sums up everything about 90s horror. I mean, come on, just look at the cast. You've got Freddie Prinze Jr., Sarah Michelle Gellar, Jennifer Love Hewitt. It couldn't possibly be any more 90s if it tried. Hell, even Johnny Galecki of The Big Bang Theory shows up, serving as the whodunit's red herring. Jennifer Love Hewitt's Julie James, though, is the eventual final girl of the film. And before you jump down my throat about how she isn't forgotten at all, let me first explain. Yes, people remember Julie, and yes, people remember this movie. But it's a long joked about thing that she's actually kinda the wrong final girl. And Sarah Michelle Gellar ends up being far more memorable in the flick. And that is true, but it's not to completely throw Love Hewitt's contribution away. Her character is still integral to the movie's success, it's just that, like Alex in Final Destination, she was surrounded by too many up-and-coming stars that fans today, including myself, remember as more synonymous with the movie instead. Number 3, Helen Lyle, Candyman. The original Candyman is a bit of a bona fide classic by now. While the titular villain has never really reached the heights of Jason or Freddy, tragically, he still is a great movie monster with a lot of depth to his character rather than just being a terrifying facade. Of course, it's Tony Todd's Candyman who we remember for this specific reason, and the hero of that first flick, Helen Lyle, often gets more overlooked as horror heroines go. In the film, she's a grad student studying urban legends when she comes across the myth of the Candyman. And from then onwards, things go from bad to worse. Not only does Helen have to contend with a supernatural being, but she's attacked by gang members, pinned as the killer by the police, and committed to a psychiatric hospital. And, just for the cherry on top, even has a cheating husband at home waiting for her to come back to. Even despite all of this, though, Helen is determined to rescue the young boy that Candyman has kidnapped, and makes the ultimate sacrifice to give her own life to save the child, thus becoming a vengeful spirit herself. No good deed goes unpunished, as people say, but it makes for one hell of a character journey. Number 2, ERIN Harson, You're Next. Now, ERIN is what all final girls want to be. After being thrown into a deadly game of hide-and-seek at her in-laws' house, she doesn't wilt under the pressure but instead takes action. Rather than hide, she turns the tables on her attackers and begins fighting back. She sets traps, uses anything she can get her hands on as a weapon, and generally proves to be a pretty terrible target for the animal-masked intruders. After discovering as well that the attackers are in fact her boyfriend and his family, ERIN refuses to let this inhibit her judgment. She doesn't let her boyfriend off the hook and instead exacts sweet revenge. Ultimately, ERIN rules, and if you don't know that this character subversion is coming, it makes You're Next all the more sweeter. Number 1, Taylor Gentry, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Mockumentary may not be most people's go-to style for a horror film, but behind the mask, the rise of Leslie Vernon is exactly that. In a pleasant surprise though, it absolutely works really well, offering a meta take on the genre that feels fresh while still packing in some good scares. See, the film revolves around the titular character who has grown up in a world where slasher icons like Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees are actually real and he idolizes them. Vernon wants to be the next big thing in horror, giving himself a nice backstory to really embellish the details. His plan then is to orchestrate a killing spree on a group of teenagers, and he has even chosen a final girl to face off with him. And say what you want about his motivations, but Leslie absolutely has done his horror homework. Because it's all filmed as a mockumentary, there has to be someone behind the camera chronicling these events, and that person is journalist Taylor Gentry. Taylor follows Leslie as he sets out his plan and rigs his traps, all the while doubting her conscience and wondering whether or not she should just stand by. Like any good horror hero, of course, she decides to intervene and help the teens, only to reveal that she was Leslie's chosen final girl all along, fulfilling his self-proclaimed prophecy. Most horror fans probably saw this twist coming from a mile away, but that doesn't detract from the fact that the film is still an excellent meta homage to horror in general. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What do you think about these horror movie heroes? And are there any great ones I missed off here? Let us know, and while you're down there, if you could, please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't, I've been Josh. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.